Book 1, Canto 8. The Legend of the Knight of Red Cross. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Morgan Scorpion. The Faerie Queene by Edmund Spenser. Book 1. The Legend of the Knight of Red Cross. Canto 8. Fair virgin to redeem her dear brings Arthur to the fight, who slays the giant, wounds the beast, and strips Duessa quite. Ay me, how many perils do unfold the righteous man, to make him daily fall, were not that heavenly grace doth him uphold, and steadfast truth acquite him out of all. Her love is firm, her care continual, so oft as he through his own foolish pride or weakness is to sinful bands made thrall. Else should this Red Cross Knight in bands have died, for whose deliverance she this Prince doth thither guide. They sadly travailed thus, until they came nigh unto a castle builded strong and high. Then cried the dwarf, Lo, yonder is the same, in which my lord, my liege, doth luckless lie, thrall to that giant's hatefull tyranny. Therefore, dear Sir, your mighty powers assay. The noble knight alighted by and by from lofty steed, and bade the lady stay, to see what end of fight should him befall that day. So with the squire, the admirer of his might, he marched forth towards that castle wall, whose gates he found fast shut, nor living wight to ward the same, nor answer comers call. Then tooke that squire an horn of bugle small, which hung adown his side in twisted gold and tassels gay. Wide wonders over all of that same horns great vertue weren told, which had approved been in uses manifold. Was never wight, that heard that shrilling sound, but trembling feare did feel in every veine. 3 miles it might be easy heard around, and echos 3 answered it selfe againe. No false enchantment, nor deceitfull traine might once abide the terror of that blast, but presently was void and wholly vaine. No gate so strong, no lock so firm and fast, but with that pursing noise flew open quite, or brast. The same before the giants gate he blew, that all the castle quaked from the ground, and every door of free will open flew. The giant selfe dismayd with that sound, where he with his Duessa dalliance found, in hast came rushing forth from inner bowre, with staring countenance stern, as one astound, and staggering steps, to weet what sudden stowre had wrought that horror strange, and dared his dreaded powre. And after him the proud Duessa came, high mounted on her many-headed beast, and every head with fiery tongue did flame, and every head was crowned on his creast, and bloody mouthed with late cruel feast, that when the knight beheld, his mighty shield upon his manly arme he soon addreft, and at him fiercely flew, with courage fild, and eager greediness through every member thrilled. Therewith the giant buckled him to fight, inflamed with scornfull wrath and high disdaine, and lifting up his dreadfull club on hight, all armed with ragged snubs and knotted graine, him thought at first encounter to have slaine. But wise and wary was that noble peere, and lightly leaping from so monstrous maine, did faire avoyd the violence him neare. It booted nought to think such thunderbolts to beare. Nor shame he thought to shun so hideous might. The idle stroke, enforcing furious way, mist the mark of his misaimed sight, did fall to ground, and with his heavy sway, so deeply dinted in the drunken clay, that 3 yards deep a furrow up did throw. The sad earth wounded with so sore affay, did groane full grievous underneath the blow, and trembling with strange feare, did like an earthquake shew. As when almighty Jove in wrathfull mood, to wreake the guilt of mortall finnes is bent, hurles forth his thundering dart with deadly food, enrolled in flames, and smouldering dreariment, through riven clouds and molten firmament, the fierce 3-forked engine making way, both lofty towers and highest trees hath rent, and all that might his angry passage stay, and shooting in the earth, casts up a mount of clay. His boyft'rous club so buried in the ground, he could not rearen up againe so light, but that the knight him at advantage found, And whiles he ftrove his combrade club to quite Out of the earth, with blade all burning bright, He fmote off his left arme, which like a block Did fall to ground, depriv'd of native might. Large ftreames of blood out of the trunked stocke Forth gufht, like frefh water ftream'd from riven rock. Dismayd with fo defperate deadly wound, And eke impatient of unwonted paine, He loudly brayed with beaftly yelling found, That all the fields rebellowed againe, As great a noyfe, as when in Cimbrian plaine An herd of bulls, whom kindly rage doth fting, Do for the milky mothers want complaine, And fill the fields with troublous bellowing. The neighbour woods around with hollow murmur ring. And when his deare Duessa heard, and faw The evill ftound, that daungerd her eftate, Unto his fide fhe haftily did draw Her dreadfull beaft, who fwollen with blood of late Came ramping forth with proud prefumptuous gate, And threatned all his heads like flaming brands. But him the squire made quickly to retrate, Encountring fierce with fingle fword in hand, And twixt him and his lord did like a bulwarke stand. The proud Duessa, full of wrathfull fpight And fierce difdaine, to be affronted fo, Enforced her purple breaft with all her might, That ftopt out of the way to overthrow, Scorning the let of fo unequall foe. But nethermore would that couragious fwaine To her yield paflage, gainft his lord to go, But with outragious ftrokes did him reftraine, And with his body barr'd the way atwixt them twaine. Then tooke the angry witch her golden cup, Which ftill fhe bore, replete with magique arts. Death and defpaire did many thereof fup, And fecret poyfon through their inner parts, Th'eternall bale of heavy wounded harts. Which after charmes and fome enchantments fayd, She lightly fprinckled on his weaker parts. Therewith his fturdy courage foone was quayd, And all his fences were with fudden dread difmayd. So downe he fell before the cruel beaft, Who on his necke his bloody clawes did feize, That life nigh crufht out of his panting breaft. No powre had he to ftirre, nor will to rize, That when the carefull knight gan well avize, He lightly left the foe, with whom he fought, And to the beaft gan turne his enterprize. For wondrous anguifh in his heart it wrought, To see his loved squire into fuch thraldome brought. And high advancing his bloodthirsty blade, Ftroke one of thofe deformed heads fo fore, That of his puifance proud enfample made, His monftrous fculpe downe to his teeth it tore, And that misformed fhape misfhaped more. A fea of blood gufht from the gaping wound, That her gay garments ftained with filthy gore, And overflowed all the field around, That overfhoes in blood he waded on the ground. Thereat he roar'd for exceeding paine, That to have heard great horror would have bred, And fcourging the empty aire with his long traine, Through great impatience of his grieved head, His gorgeous rider from her lofty ftead Would have caft downe, and trod in dirty mire, Had not the Gyant foone her fuccored, Who all enraged with fmart and frantique ire, Came hurtling in full fierce, and forced the knight retire. The force, which wont in two to be difperft, In one alone left hand he now unites, Which is through rage more ftrong then both were erft, With which his hideous club aloft he dights, And at his foe with furious rigour fmites, That ftrongeft oake might feeme to overthrow. The ftroke upon his fhield fo heavy lights, That to the ground it doubleth him full low. What mortall wight could ever beare fo monftrous blow? And in his fall his fhield, that covered was, Did loose his vaile by chance, and open flew The light whereof, that heavens light did pas, Such blazing brightnefle to the aire threw, That eye mote not the fame endure to view. Which when the Gyant fpide with ftaring eye, He downe let fall his arme, and foft withdrew His weapon huge, that heaved was on high, For to have flaine the man, that on the ground did lie. And eke the fruitfull headed beaft, amazed At flashing beames of that funfhiny fhield, Became ftarke blind, and all his fences dazed, That downe he tumbled on the dirty field, And feemed himfelfe as conquered to yield. Whom when his maiftris proud perceived to fall, Whilft yet his feeble feet for faintnefle reeled, Unto the Gyant loudly fhe gan call, O help, Orgoglio, help, or else we perifh all. At her fo piteous cry was much amoved our champion ftout, And for to ayd his friend, againe his wonted angry weapon proved. But all in vaine, for he has red his end In that bright fhield, and all their forces fpend In themfelves in vaine, for fince that glauncing fight He hath no powre to hurt nor to defend. as where the Almighty's lightning bronze does light, it dimmes the dazen iron, and daunts the senfes quite. Whom when the Prince to battell new addreft, And threatning high his dreadfull ftroke did fee, His fparkling blade about his head he bleft, And fmote off quite his right leg by the knee, That downe he tumbled, as an aged tree High growing on the top of rocky clift, Whofe heartftrings with keene fteele nigh hewen be. That mighty trunke half rent with ragged rift, Doth roll adowne the rockes, and fall with fearefull drift. Or as a caftle, reared high and round By fubtle engines and malicious flight, Is undermin'd from the loweft ground, And her foundation forced and feebled quite, At laft downe falls, and with her heaped hight Her hasty ruine does more heavy make, And yeelds it felfe unto the Victors might. Such was this Gyants fall, that feem'd to fhake The ftedfaft globe of earth, as it for feare did quake. The Knight then lightly leaping to the pray, With mortall fteele him fmote againe fo fore, That headlefle his unwieldly body lay, And wallow'd in his owne foule bloudie gore, Which flow'd from his wounds in wondrous ftore. But foone as breath out of his breaft did pas, That huge great body, which the Gyant bore, Was vanifht quite, and of that monftrous mafle Was nothing left, but like an empty bladder was. Whofe grievous fall, when falfe Duessa fpide, Her golden cup fhe caft unto the ground, And crowned mitre rudely threw afide. Such piercing griefe her ftubborn heart did wound, That fhe could not endure that dolefull ftound, But leaving all behind her, fled away. The light-foot squire her quickly turned around, And by hard meanes enforcing her to ftay, So brought unto his lord, as his deferved pray. The royall Virgin, which beheld from farre In penfive plight and fad perplexity The whole atchievement of this doubtfull warre, Came running faft to greet his vidtory, With fober gladnefle and mild modefty, And with fweet joyous cheare him thus befpake: Faire branch of noblefle, flowre of chevalry, That with your worth the world amazed make, How fhall I quite the paines ye fuffer for my fake? And you frefh bud of vertue fpringing faft, Whom thefe fad eyes faw nigh unto deaths dore, What hath poore Virgin for fuch perill paft Wherewith you to reward? Accept therefore my fimple felfe, and fervice evermore, And he that high does fit, and all things fee, With equall eyes their merits to reftore. Behold what ye this day have done for mee, And what I cannot quite requite with ufury. But fith the heavens and your faire handling Have made you maister of the field this day, Your fortune maister eke with governing, And well begonne end all fo well, I pray. Ne let that wicked woman fcape away, For fhe it is, that did my lord bethrall, My deareft lord, and deepe in dungeon lay, Where he his better dayes hath wafted all. O heare, how piteous he to you for ayde doth call. Forthwith he gave in charge unto his squire That fcarlet whore to keepen carefully, Whileft he himfelfe with greedy great defire Into the caftle entred forcibly, Where living creature none he did efpy. Then gan he loudly through the houfe to call, But no man cared to anfwere to his cry. There reigned a folemn filence over all, Ne voice was heard, nor wight was feene in bowre or hall. At laft with creeping crooked pace forth came An old man, with beard as white as fnow, That on a ftaffe his feeble fteps did frame, And guide his weary gait both to and fro. For his eye fight him failed long ago, And on his arme a bunch of keyes he bore, The which unufed ruft did overgrow. Thofe were the keyes of every inner dore, But he could not them ufe, but kept them ftill in ftore. But very uncouth fight was to behold, How he did fafhion his untoward pace. For as he forward moved his footing old, So backward ftill was turned his wrinkled face, Unlike to men, who ever as they trace Both feet and face one way are wont to lead. This was the ancient keeper of that place, And fofter father of the Gyant dead, His name Ignaro did his nature right areed. His reverend haires and holy gravity The Knight much honored as befeemed well, And gently asked where all the people be, Which in that stately building wont to dwell. Who anfwered him full foft, he could not tell. Againe he asked, where that fame Knight was layd, Whom great Orgoglio with his puifance fell Had made his caytive thrall. Againe he faid, he could not tell, Ne ever other anfwere made. Then asked he, which way he in might pass. He could not tell, again he answered. Thereat the courteous knight difpleafed was, and said: Old Sire, it feemes thou haft not read, How ill it fits with that fame filver head In vaine to mock, or mocked in vaine to be. But if thou be, as thou art portrayd, With natures pen in ages grave degree, Read in graver wize, what I demaund of thee. His answer likenefle was, he could not tell, Whofe fencelefle fpeach and doted ignorance, When as the noble Prince had marked well, He gheft his nature by his countenance, And calm'd his wrath with goodly temperance. Then to him ftepping, from his arme did reach Thofe keyes, and made himfelfe free enterance. Each dore he opened without any breach, There was no barre to ftop, nor foe him to impeach. There all within full rich arrayd he found With royal arras and refplendent gold, And did with ftore of every thing abound, That great Princes prefence might behold. But all the floore, too filthy to be told, With blood of guiltlefle babes and innocents true, Which there were flaine as fheepe out of the fold, Defiled was, that dreadfull was to vew, And facred afhes over it was ftrowed new. And there befide of marble ftone was built An altar, carved with cunning imagery, On which true Christians blood was often spilt, And holy martyrs often doen to die With cruel malice and ftrong tyranny. Whofe bleffed fprites from underneath the ftone To God for vengeance cryd continually, And with great griefe were often heard to grone, That hardeft heart would bleed to heare their piteous mone. Through every roome he fought, and every bowre, But no where could he find that wofull thrall. At laft he came unto an yron dore, That faft was lockt, but key found not at all Amongft that bunch, to open it withall. But in the fame a little grate was pight, Through which he fent his voice, and loud did call, With all his powre, to weet, if living wight Were housed therein, whom he enlargen might. There with an hollow dreary murmring voice Thefe piteous plaints and dolours did refound. O who is that, which brings me happy choice Of death, that here lie dying every ftound, Yet live perforce in balefull darknefle bound? For now 3 moones have changed thrice their hew, And have been thrice hid underneath the ground, Since I the heavens chearefull face did vew. O welcome thou, that doeft of death bring tidings trew. Which when that champion heard, with piercing point Of pitty deare his heart was thrilled fore, And trembling horror ran through every joint, For ruth of gentle knight fo foule forlore. Which fhaking off, he rent that yron dore With furious force, and indignation fell, Where entred in, his foot could find no floore, But all a deepe defcent as darke as hell, That breathed ever forth a filthy banefull fmell. But neither darknefle foule, nor filthy bands, Nor noyous fmell his purpofe could withhold. Entire affection hateth nicer hands. But that with conftant zeale and courage bold, After long paines and labours manifold, He found the meanes that prifoner up to reare, Whofe feeble thighs, unable to uphold His pined courfe, him fcarce to light could beare, A ruefull spectacle of death and ghaftly dreare. His fad dull eyes, deepe funk in hollow pits, Could not endure th' unwonted Sunne to vew. His bare thin cheekes, for want of better bits, And empty fides deceived of their vew, Could make a stony hart his hap to rew. His raw-bone armes, whofe mighty brawnced bowes Were wont to rive fteele plates and helmets hew, Were cleane confum'd, and all his vitall powres decayd, And all his flefh fhrunk up like withred flowres. Whom when his Lady faw, to him fhe ran With hasty joy, to see him made her glad, And fad to view his visage pale and wan, Who earft in flowres of frefheft youth was clad. Though when her well of teares fhe wafted had, She said: Ah deareft Lord, what evill ftarre On you hath frowned, and powr'd this influence bad, That of your felfe ye thus berobbed are, And this mifeeming hew your manly lookes doth marre. But welcome now, my Lord, in weal or woe, Whofe prefence I have lackt too long a day, And fie on Fortune, mine avowed foe, Whofe wrathfull wreakes themfelves do now allay, And for thefe wrongs fhall treble penance pay Of treble good. Good growes of evills proof. The chearelefle man, whom forrow did difmay, Had no delight to treaten of his griefe, His long endured famine needed more reliefe. Faire Lady, then faid that victorious knight, The things that grievous were to do or beare, Them to renew I wote, breeds no delight. Beft musique breeds delight in lothing eare, But the onely good, that growes of passed feare, Is to be wise, and ware of like againe. This dayes ensample hath this leflon deare Deepe written in my hart with iron pen, That bliffe may not abide in ftate of mortall men. Henceforth, Sir Knight, take to you wonted ftrength, And maister thefe mishaps with patient might. Lo where your foe lies ftretcht in monftrous length, And lo that wicked woman in your fight, The root of all your care and wretched plight. Now in your powre to let her live or die. To doe her die, quoth Una, were defpight, And fhame to avenge fo weake an enemy. But fpoile her of her fcarlet robe, and let her fly. So as fhe bad, that which they difarrayd, And robed of royall robes, and purple pall, And ornaments, that richly were difplayd. Ne fpared they to ftrip her naked all, That when they had defpoiled her tire and call, Such as fhe was, their eyes might her behold, That her mifhapen parts did them appall. A loathly wrinkeld hag, ill favoured, old, Whofe fecret filth good manners biddeth not be told. Her crafty head was altogether bald, And as in hate of honourable eld Was overgrowne with fcurfe and filthy fcald. Her teeth out of her rotten gums were feld, And her foure breath abominably fmeld. Her dryed dugs, like bladders lacking wind, hung downe, And filthy matter from them weld. Her rizled skin as rough as maple rind, So fcabby was, that would have loathed all womankind. Her nether parts, the fhame of all her kind, My chafter mufe for fhame doth blufh to write. But at her rump fhe growing had behind A foxes taile, with dung all fouly dight, And eke her feet her moft monftrous were in fight. For one of them was like an eagles claw, With gripping talons arm'd to greedy flight. The other like of beares uneven paw, More ugly fhape yet never living creature faw. Which when the knights beheld, amazed they were, And wondred at fo foule deformed wight. Such then, faid Una, as fhe feemeth here, Such is the face of falfhood, fuch the fight Of foule Duessa, when her borrowed light Is laid away, and counterfeifance knowne. Thus when they had the witch disrobed quite, And all her filthy feature open fhowne, They let her go at will, and wander wayes unknowne. She flying faft from heavens hated face, And from the world that her difcovered wide, Fled to the wafteful wildernefle apace, From living eyes her open fhame to hide, And lurkt in rocks and caves long unefpide. But that faire crew of knights, and Una faire, Did in that caftle afterwards abide, To reft themfelves, and weary powers rare, Where ftore they found of all, that dainty was and rare. End of Canto 8, Book I. The Legend of the Knight of Red Cross.